All right, so now I've got these major components in. I've got horns, I've got tusks, I've got this kind of coral, what I was thinking of as a crest or a crown, but it's really just going to be kind of a textural treatment. I think that will help and replace the nose. Move it down a little bit more. That can help transition into the horns and everything. Got these sea dragon tendrils, got the hippo foot, got the sea lion back legs. I've got the killer whale kind of waxy texture to work into it as needed with the color. But silhouette-wise, like everything's kind of too crazy up here and too boring back here. So I might decide to add something in, which I often do. So I'm going to take this coral that I found. Nice big reference. Nicely photographed with just white on the outside. Select all that empty space. Select inverse. Refine the edge. I thought I might add this to his back. So dramatic texture change. The thing I like best about these fantasy creatures is like what you see in fantasy taxidermy, where they'll take like a bird and give it a rabbit's head, mixing kind of feathers and fur together. So I really like being able to take different textures together. And these sea coral textures, can be really interesting. Huh. What's going on here? Deselect, let me try this again. So I select the outside, I refine edge. Even a little crab hidden in there. Say okay. Now I'm going to select the inverse. Yeah, so selecting the inverse and duplicating it should give me the coral itself. There we go. All right. I don't know what was going on before. So now I can take that element, and because much like the sea dragons, it's all organic, its own thing, I can warp it and distort it with impunity, as long as Photoshop can keep up with me. And make it match the anatomy any way I see fit. I can move it down through my layers. And erase away from it. I might want some of that pattern texture. I don't know. It's like a wild cat. It's kind of a nice pattern. So I've got a lot of elements. A lot of them need to be cleaned up and tidied up. But the first thing to do is to pick the kind of color and lighting saturation that they should each have. So what I'm going to do is go element by element. First play with their levels, then play with their color balance, then play with their hue saturation. And I'll kind of settle on what works best for my creature. Alright, so I'm seeing a little bit of that texture come through. Now I'm doing this low opacity. That's going to make my creature a little even more exotic. I don't want to take away from the structure of it. So, where to begin? Because there's a lot going on. So I think I'll take away some of these features and I'll organize my layers a bit. So what I do to do that is I go from the very top and I select all the layers that are turned on. I hold down Shift. I hold down Command to select all the layers that are turned on. Avoid all the ones that aren't. I'm also going to include the killer whale colored layer. Then I'm going to use Command right bracket to move them all together to the very top. Then that allows me to start turning them off. So I can kind of see things one at a time. Okay, so I'm going to start with these ram's horns, which I'm pretty happy with where they're positioned, so I'm going to merge these two layers together. And I do that by selecting both of them, hold down Shift, and then Command E, or Layer Merge Layers. Now they're on the same layer, which allows me to do image adjustments together. First with levels. You can always play with the midtones. So I'm going to deepen the midtones a little bit. Maybe exaggerate the highlights a tiny bit. I don't think I want to play up the shadows. In fact, I might even want to limit the shadows a little. Okay, so that helps. That difference makes the lighting feel a little bit more believable. Now, color balance, there's a whole lot of orange. So I want to push away from the warms a little bit in the midtones. There we go. Some cyan. Get away from the magentas. That's looking better. Also the fur around them and the eye, that helps. Now it's kind of matching the head underneath. Now, since I've fixed that and I've kind of matched this color to this, now is a good time to cut these out so that I can see more clearly. And because they're a hard texture, I'm going to use my lasso. Right to their edge. And refine that edge. Just smoothing and biting in a little bit. That allows me just to delete without having it be too sharp. There we go. Now this horn, It's really only this outside part that hasn't been dealt with. And remember, you don't have to get it all in one pass. You can add and subtract from your selections. Add this little rim there. Add in this little divot. Refine edge. It's like cutting things out with an X-Acto knife, except that you can repair what you've done. It does take a lot of concentration. Command D to deselect. Okay, now that I've got those, it works pretty well. Now I can clean up around this head underneath. But I don't need to worry about cleaning up around it where the other things are overlapping. So that's why I didn't clean up from the very beginning. So I go to my head layer. And I'll use the lasso. And then these bristles are going to be tough. So I'm going to have to do a lot of that by hand. And I'll show you a trick for that. Okay, so I was able to get that side. Something like this, that's really easy. I just use my 100% eraser, just erase away, because other layers make up the difference of it. But down here, how do I erase away around these bristles? Well, especially when they're bright, with a white background, that's not going to work so well. So what I'm going to do is go back to my background layer, make a new layer on top of it, and fill that, not with white, so I say edit fill, but I'm going to fill it with 50% gray. That will show me things that are both lighter than 50% gray and darker than 50% gray. Then I'm going to make my eraser a lot harder, about 80% hardness, and a whole lot smaller, still at 100% opacity. And I go back to my layer. And now I have pretty good control to get around these individual little hairs. Now some of them might not be necessary to get rid of because of the tusks that come in. So let's see, let's turn on some of those features. Yeah, so I don't need to worry about it down here, but I do need to worry about all of these. And in this way, digital art is like an enabler for a perfectionist. You can zoom in as much as you want and just try to get every pixel exactly right. But for your sanity, be okay with a little bit of imperfection. So I'm not even all that zoomed in. I'm actually viewing it at print size, meaning that the pixels I'm seeing are at the right resolution now. And I know that because it says 100% down at the corner. But we're starting to put it all together now.